What if the most common blessing in a country was actually a sign of its deepest, most complicated problem? Well, today we're diving into an absolutely fascinating book from 1990 by a journalist named Elisabeth Bumiller. It's all about the profound contradictions she found in the lives of women in 1980s India.
And right here, this is the paradox that just grabs you from the very beginning. On the one hand, you have a nation being led by Indira Gandhi, one of the most powerful women on the entire planet. And on the other hand, the most common traditional blessing you could wish upon a woman was, "May you be the mother of 100 sons." I mean, how do those two things even exist in the same place at the same time?
So that's the question, right? And it's exactly what drove Elisabeth Bumiller. She actually spent more than 3 years in India, really trying to get her head around how these competing truths were shaping women's lives, day in and day out.
And her approach here was so important. She wasn't there to write some kind of judgmental exposé. No, her whole goal was just to listen, to travel all over the country and hear directly from women from every walk of life, from the poorest villagers to the most elite city dwellers, and just try to understand their world on their own terms.
All right, so to really get a handle on this paradox, we have to start by looking at the incredibly powerful, deep-rooted traditions that were shaping this society.
At the very heart of it all is this idea of son preference. You see, both culturally and economically, sons were seen as assets. They'd carry on the family name, they'd take care of their parents when they got old. Daughters, though, were often seen as liabilities, and a big reason for that was the huge financial cost of the dowry that was required to get them married.
Now, here's what's so wild. If you just look at the laws in the books, India had been pretty progressive for over a century. I mean, look at this timeline. Female infanticide was banned way back in 1870. The whole dowry system was outlawed in 61. Abortion was legalized not long after. So the laws were there, but did they actually change what was happening on the ground?
And this is where the story becomes absolutely heartbreaking. Bumiller shares this true, gut-wrenching account of a poor family who felt they had no other option but to kill their own newborn daughter. Why? Because they simply couldn't imagine a world where they could ever afford her future dowry. It's just a tragic, powerful example of the massive gap between the law and the desperate reality for millions of people.
And that reality had these absolutely devastating consequences. It led to things like sex-selective abortions, the quiet tragedy of female infanticide, and a system where girls often got less food, less medical care, and less education than their brothers. And in the most horrific cases, it led to dowry deaths, where a young bride might actually be killed by her in-laws if her family couldn't meet their demands.
If you want to grasp the sheer scale of these societal pressures, just get a load of this number. When Bumiller was writing her book, 95% of all marriages in India were arranged. This wasn't just some quaint tradition. It was the entire framework of society, and it reinforced all the roles and expectations that were placed on women from the moment they were born.
Okay, but that's just one side of the coin, because amidst all of this crushing weight of tradition, Bumiller also found these incredible stories of resilience, of agency, and of real change. She actually came up with this amazing phrase to describe what she saw: strength in powerlessness. It's the story of women who, even though they were facing these huge disadvantages built into the system, found these subtle yet powerful ways to adapt, to push back, and to carve out a life of dignity and meaning for themselves.
And she makes it so clear that there was no single Indian woman. Her book is just packed with these vivid profiles of so many different people. You've got a trailblazing police officer, a grassroots activist, a famous filmmaker, a wealthy Maharani, and Bombay movie stars. Every single one of them was navigating the exact same culture, but in a totally different way.
And this quote, this one from the celebrated film director Aparna Sen, just hits so hard because it's so incredibly relatable. Here you have this wildly successful, modern woman, and she says the one feeling that defines her is guilt. Guilt about not doing enough for her career when she's with her family, and guilt for neglecting her family when she's at work. I mean, that is such a universal feeling for working women everywhere, right?
So this is the really crucial point. There wasn't just one right way to be a strong woman. Bumiller shows us someone like Kiran Bedi, this pioneering police officer literally commanding men's lives, and then contrasts her with a Delhi housewife who found real, deep satisfaction and purpose in her traditional family role. Both were finding fulfillment, but on their own terms.
And then you had the power of women getting together. This is Elisabeth. She's the founder of an organization called Siwa, and what she did was organize thousands of the poorest self-employed women, think street vendors, artisans, and built them into one of the country's most powerful and effective unions. I mean, this was grassroots change right there in action.
So as Bumiller was listening to all of these different stories, something started to click. She began to realize this wasn't really just a story about India.
Her ultimate conclusion was that these struggles, the tension between tradition and modernity, between what society expects and what you as an individual want, between duty and desire, these are fundamentally human problems. Yeah, the details are specific to India, but the themes, those were universal.
So what are the big lessons we can pull from this journey? Well, first, that the unwritten rules of a culture often have way more power over our lives than the actual laws on the books. Second, that feeling of guilt from balancing work and home, it's not a personal failing, it's a global, systemic pressure that so many women face. And finally, that strength isn't always about breaking the rules. Sometimes it's about finding a way to live with dignity right inside of them.
And that really brings us to a final thought for ourselves. This book was written about the 1980s, but it makes you ask the question, all these years later, right here in our own societies, what are the invisible traditions, the unwritten rules, and the cultural expectations that are still shaping the lives of women today?